Hey y'all, how we doing? Shout out once again to Bear Nation for tuning in to another episode of the Bear Necessities podcast. I am your host, Rob Napoli. The Bear Necessities is a podcast where we sit down with entrepreneurs, ecosystem partners, and innovation folks to talk about what it takes and means to launch, create, and scale business across the world. We talk about the journey and the challenges of being entrepreneurial minded and how that translates into your journey, giving you the tools and knowledge to overcome challenges that you may be facing in your life's journey. The Bear Necessities is part of the Rise Up Media family. We thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get into the show. What is up, Bear Nation? This is your host, Rob Napoli, and really excited about this week's episode. It's all about why founders should sell. And it's something that I'm extremely passionate about. Whether you're a business-oriented founder or a technical-oriented founder, every founder should understand how to sell and why. And honestly, it comes down to a couple of things. One, it allows you to really find your product market fit. It allows you to understand your value prop and what makes you unique. And it also proves scalability. Right? If you're hiring salespeople, hiring a team in, it allows you to show it's scalable. And the other big piece that many of us don't think about, if you are a founder and you can't sell your product to your customers, how do you think you're going to go about getting funding? How are you going to be able to sell this to an investor? And so I get into that topic with my guest today. My guest is Carol Malakasis. Carol's amazing. She's a New York City startup vet with over 12 years experience in selling. She's had 3 exits, one early on in her career as a founder, and 2 as a founding member of companies that she has helped scale. She's made over 500,000 cold calls and believes that anyone can sell if taught the right way. She's a managing partner at Ramped, a consulting firm working with early stage founders, helping them go from 0 to 1 million in ARR. It's a lot of fun. We're recording this virtually, as right now she is spending some time back home with her family in Greece. So amazing that she is joining us from the beautiful country of Greece while she's getting to enjoy a little bit of time with her family. For those who don't know, she's quintilingual, so she knows 5 languages. She's super amazing and brings a lot of selling background and understands what it takes for founders to scale. So this is a great episode. There's a lot of key takeaways and things that you can implement right away into process and things like that. So without further ado, I'm going to get you to the show. But last but not least, I got to throw this out there. If you missed it last week, we released a new version of my website. It was really important for us to simplify kind of the brand. I'd spent the last 2 years building Rise Up, coaching Rise Up Media. It's been a very special journey of learning a lot of lessons, and it feels surreal as I look back at it. But the more that the brand and opportunities grew, the more that I needed to consolidate and simplify the full brand experience, and it's iterated. So we did the full rebrand. I got a new website. You can check it out at www.robnapoli.com. Check it out and follow all the assets and continue to follow Journey. I appreciate you for being a part of Bear Nation. So now let's get into the show with Carol on why founders should sell. All right. Carol, how are we doing today? I'm excited to have you joining Bear Nation. How are you doing?
So good to see you. And what a global episode. You're in the States. I'm in Greece. So happy to do this.
Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah. I love the fact that I can talk to anybody anywhere. And we've had guests all over the place. And one of my favorite things about this podcast is that we've had listeners in 58 countries. And one of my goals is to interview somebody from every country in the world. So it's all good stuff, and excited to have you on, calling in from Greece, even though we both live in New York. So Carol, today's episode is all about why founders should sell. And I know this is something that you are extremely passionate about as the startup girl. So if you could give Bear Nation a quick background on yourself.
Yeah. So I've been in sales for a little over 12 years now. And I like to say that I started as an accidental founder. So my goal was never to be a founder of a company, but it just so happened that when I moved into New York, I had previously worked for a food company, so I was familiar with the CPG space, and I noticed that there was a lack of non-dairy products. So my partner and I at the time, back in 2010, we co-founded a company that was making a non-dairy milk. We were manufacturing the product in a tiny little kitchen in Brooklyn, selling it to different health stores, and our company got acquired by a bigger beverage company about a year and a half in. And I joined my first tech startup as a founding member of the sales team in 2013. Prior to consulting, all the startups I've been a part of have been selling to the restaurant space, and I've had 3 exits helping startups scale, selling to SMBs. And for the past 2 years, I consult early stage C to Series A founders on how to build and scale their first sales playbook.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And it's exciting because, for Bear Nation, some of the companies that Carol's worked for include Main Street Hub, which was acquired by GoDaddy, Wix, Seated, which is actually, I was going back through. So there's a couple connection paths here. So Carol is a graduate of the University of Kansas. And those that know me, know that I'm a rock chalk. My dad went to Kansas. My whole family, we grew up. Yeah, Kansas City. I'm a Missouri-born boy, but Kansas Jayhawk fan because my uncle, my dad, my cousins played volleyball there. So we have that rock chalk connection. I remember when we met, but I was actually thinking about when we first connected, and it was actually when you were an account manager or senior accounts manager at Seated, and I was a recruiter at Michael Page. And I found an old message where I'd reached out to you and we had connected way back when. As I was trying to get in. Yeah. And then we kind of came back into each other's ecosystems during the WeWork program for WeWork Startup Lab, which I know you're a mentor for. And that was where we reconnected. And so anyways, I was doing some old school digging in my LinkedIn and found those connection paths. So again, the world is small. And then we finally got to meet in person. Was it?
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying, I had no idea you and I spoke when I was selling at Seated. That's just wild to think of. But to your point, it's a very small tech world. And yes, we officially re-met when we were both part of the WeWork Sales Labs program. And we also met in person with your work at Startup, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So Startup Ventures that when the pitch nights, and you came and we got to meet and chat. So I'm excited to have this conversation because currently you're the managing partner and head of training at Ramped, which you help founders really create kind of, the sales playbook, for example. And that's why I really am interested in this topic. So I and my audience knows that I believe founders should sell, and you hold that same belief. So let's start with this question: why should founders be able to sell?
Oh my gosh, it's such a big and important question, and there's a lot to it. So there is no one better at an early stage startup that has no product market fit, that has no customers, that really doesn't have a process than the founder to lead and build that out until there is some sort of positive, predictable response in the market. And then they can, bring more people in. But no one knows the product better than the founders. No one is ever going to be more passionate about it. And again, early on, it's just a big data gathering experience. So when you have assumptions of what it is that you are building, the solution that it is that you're providing, just because of that knowledge that you have as someone that's been so involved early on. There's no one better than you to go and test that out.
Absolutely. And, I love that you bring that out, because no one's going to have the same energy, passion, or belief in the product like you are as the founder in an early stage. And then I always share this with founders when I talk to them is, how can you go and sell to an investor? You can't sell to your customer.
Of course.
Like, plain and simple, how do you expect to go get funding and sell yourself and your company to an investor if you can't do it to your customer? So I love that sentiment. And, there's a lot of founders out there that are not natural sales people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not natural at sales. They're technical engineering backgrounds. So where do you start? So you get an early stage founder and they're like, Carol, I need help selling the company, the product. Like, I'm not a salesperson by trade. As the head of training, where do you start? Like, because sales is complicated and sales is a process. So kind of maybe walk us through, where do you start with a founder who's not a natural seller, and how you kind of walk them through that process?
Sure. So just to clarify for our audience, 99% of the people that I work with are non-business founders. They are technical founders. They're engineers. They have built the product, meaning that they do not have a sales intuition, and things that are very obvious to me, having sold for so long, are not obvious to them. This is not the way their brain thinks. So it's a very interesting process, because they have all this knowledge around the product and the market in their brain, for me to try to put that on paper and create those processes for them. But what I've seen is, because you're asking, okay, how do we do it? I'll create processes for them, but the people that really do extremely well and blow it out of the water and are very successful at founder sales, and then they'll go on to become a founder manager when they have salespeople on board, the main characteristics and the how-to is really, which I know is going to sound very simple or simplistic, it boils down to them being coachable, and it boils down to them being curious, and it boils down to them really trusting the process and following the process and understanding the importance of going out and test the market and focusing on that and just listening to whatever it is that I teach them, and then going out and putting their assumptions to the test. That's all we're doing at this very early stage.
Yeah. Coachable, right? Huge thing.
Focused.
Curious. Yeah. These are things, I think the coachable, curious, and process oriented is really key. And almost to the point where, like, when you're looking with technical founders, when they're building product and stuff like that, they have to run a process. So they're like process oriented. And it's like, if you can understand that sales is process oriented as well, step 1, step 2, step 3, top of funnel all the way down, I'm guessing that probably helps them a little bit, kind of like flow chart that in their brains. But that's only taking them so far. So when you start looking at when we start working with founders that aren't great sales people, how do you, like, once you kind of give them that like curiosity and the coachability and you start helping with process, what is it like? Everyone always says, like, I'm scared to do something wrong or hear no. Like,
sure.
What do you do with founders to get them? It needs to drip off their tongue. So process is one thing, but what about execution? What about that being able to speak it into existence? Like, what is that like? And what do you see some of the main kind of challenges or things that, for people out there listening that want to get better at selling themselves and their companies, that you would say, hey, this is like something you should be doing for yourself right now that's going to help you level up?
So there's a few questions in there, and I want to unpack them. I want to start with something you said about, not being a great salesperson. And I will tell you that First of all, I don't believe in not being a great salesperson in the sense that sales can be taught. And I know that from myself because when I started selling my own product, I was doing outside sales. You could say that, perhaps it comes easier to me because I'm a natural extrovert. I like talking to people. But when I transitioned to selling over the phone, cold calling, working for my first startup, I was very bad at it. It was a new skill set for me. I came in very cocky and very confident, and I thought I would blow it out of the water. And I almost got fired.
Mhm.
And there were processes I needed to learn and put my head down and do the work in order to become good at it. So because I have this personal experience myself, even though my background isn't technical, I know that sales can be absolutely taught. So before we go into processes and execution, it starts with mindset. I think one of the biggest advantages to have is adopting the idea of a growth mindset. And it's something I talk to my clients about a lot. So growth mindset says, I can learn, I can apply myself, I can get better. A fixed mindset, which is the opposite, is the idea that, I'm born with certain talents, I'm born with certain traits, and there's so far I can go. I'm technical, I don't know how to sell, selling is scary. We have the stereotype of the used car salesperson in my head. I don't want to do it, I don't want to be pushy, I'm not going to bother with it. Well, if that's your mindset, you're probably not going to do very well. But if you have the mindset of, I am the best person to do this because of my knowledge and my passion, and this is the only way to scale, your approach is very different. And because your approach is very different, execution comes a lot easier. But to just speak to execution specifically, it's just a matter of repetition. It's a matter of practicing your scripts. It's a matter of refining your messaging. It's a matter of knowing what your elevator pitch is. It's a matter of being able to explain your value add. And obviously, those are things I help with. But I will tell you, Rob, and I'm sure you see this a lot yourself, that I'll get requests on LinkedIn of people saying, hey, Carol, can you chat? Hey, Carol, I have a few questions. And we'll hop on a phone call. And there comes a point in the conversation where I'll say, okay, so what do you actually do? What does your product do? And very few people can answer that. And it's more so a non-structured sort of spiel on what it is that they're building, but there's no sort of structured thought process or verbiage or a way to explain, I do this. This is what I'm working on. And it's very important to nail that early on, whether you're working with a coach or not, because to your point, you're going to be selling a lot. You're going to be selling to customers. You're going to be selling to investors. You're going to be selling to your first hires. So being able to communicate your thoughts and being able to communicate what your company does to your audience is not something you can skip or is not something you can afford to mess up.
Yeah. I mean, I actually asked the question now. It's like, tell me about what your company does in 2 minutes or less. Because usually when I say, what do you do? Right? It's like a 20-minute spiel.
Yes.
Not literally 20 minutes, more like 5 to 10 minutes before they get to the damn point. And I'm like, you've already lost me. And if you've lost me, you're probably going to lose your customer. And if you lost your customer, you're going to lose your investor. Right? And you talk a little bit there about scripts. And this is like, I know this is kind of like out there. There's some people that like believe in scripts. Some people don't. I know you believe in scripts. Why are scripts so useful for founders? Right. And I get like scripts when you're teaching salespeople. And I love how you brought up that you learn sales and anyone can learn it. Right. It's like, it's really easy that we can give a script to like a new college grad SDR, like, hey, use the script and learn. But founders, for whatever reason, we're like, no, don't use a script. You should, like, you're more experienced. Like, but you're like, hey, anyone should be using a script, and here's why. So why don't you tell us, like, why do you believe in the power of having a script to start with a founder learning how to sell?
So founders are not more experienced than an SDR starting to sell. They may be, more knowledgeable when it comes to the technical part of the product, building and shipping product, but they're not more knowledgeable when it comes to sales. So you can't run before you walk. And when I'm saying follow a script, I'm not saying read it off, be robotic, sound salesy, sound like you're not yourself, but you need a structured way of explaining what you do. You need to be able to control a conversation. You need to be able to ask your prospects or investors the right questions. You want to have a mental roadmap that this is where I start, this is where I end, this is what my goal is, this is when I want to get out of that conversation. And exactly because there's no prior knowledge or experience in selling, if I don't provide you, or if someone doesn't provide you with some sort of process or script, you will be lost. And it either becomes a pitch fest, or the prospect will run all over you, or you're not able to set next steps, or you don't get the answers you want. And none of those scenarios are helpful to you.
Yeah. So I love that you share that, because even today, right, I lead a training development company. I do a lot of trainings for a lot of companies, a lot of people, and I could have done the training 100 times, right? And yes, I have a deck to keep you online, but I also have an outline, and it's a reminder of like, hey, if this happens, then this. Watch out for this. Like, listen for this. And I don't always use it. A lot of times I don't need to at this point, but it's always there. So if I ever get, we always kind of joke like having a brain fart. It happens. We all get it. Sometimes you lose track of the question or the answer, and just having something written in front of you that you kind of like come back to and kind of recycle it back into the conversation is super helpful. But also, your brain, especially as a founder, when you're thinking about potentially you're selling, early product market fit, trying to sell, trying to ship product, working with the engineering team, talking to investors, hiring new people for your team, your brain is fractured literally with different things that you have to think about. So why not have a visual aid of if then this should happen, and having some common objections that you can overcome, or a story or a case study. It's like, hey, if this comes up and they ask about this, use this case study. And then being able to just see that flow chart, have it there written out. And also when you see it written out, what I'm a big fan of, because Carol, I can talk. My audience knows I can talk, right? But I only got 25 minutes with a prospect, right? I need to know what the bullet points I need to hit, and I need to know when to stop talking. And sometimes it's just having those visuals. When you write it out, you realize this is way too much, because you write it out and then you start saying, it's like, oh, that's like 5 minutes just to explain. Of a 20-minute call, I'm wasting 5 minutes on what I do. Like, that's too much time. And it really allows you to start, being more concise, which leads to better understanding and better execution. Right? That's to me, that's so crazy.
I agree with everything you're saying. And just to give you some stats, in the past calendar year, I've worked with about 50 companies. And I listen to a lot of calls that founders have with their clients. And there is a huge difference in outcome, in setting next steps, in amount of deals closed, in amount of money coming in your company from new customers, in whether a founder uses a script and a structure during those conversations, or if it's freestyled. It is night and day. Absolutely.
I love that. And having that kind of data to back up is huge, right? And so I'm going to ask you this question as somebody who's worked in sales for 12 years. What's the worst sales call you've ever been on?
That I've made, like, or that I've looked into other people?
No, but for you personally, I know, we all have that one call that kind of changed everything for us. What was that call for you that really like took you down this path of being curious and coachable in your sales world and your sales experience?
It wasn't one call. It was many calls. I was just very bad. I could not close a sale to save my life. I mean, I was cold calling to restaurants. Everyone was telling me to F off or would hang up on me. I was making about 150 dials a day and I could not get it right. And I was very upset about it. So I actually did something about it. I would shadow the top reps. I would ask people out to lunch and, try to learn what's working for them. I would role play the script. I remember every night I would go home after work, I'd ask my boyfriend, hey, can I please practice this with you? Can you listen to my pitch? I'd work late with my manager. I'd listen to my own recordings. I did everything humanly possible to try to change this disadvantage I have of not being very good at it. And in 3 months that I was dreading I was going to lose my job, I earned a promotion and then another one and another one. But that's why I revert back to sales can be taught. Obviously, if you like talking to people, you have a natural advantage. But again, I'm an extreme extrovert. I love running my
Mhm.
mouth. The idea of getting paid to talk is very appealing to me. But I wasn't very good
Yeah.
at it because I was lacking processes, fundamentals, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think, I mean, for me, I remember um, kind of two different things. One, when I started selling, we had mirrors at our desk, right? The smile and dial.
Yes.
And I still believe in
Yes.
that, in the fact that when you're making cold calls, it's hard. It sucks. Like I actually love, I coach to do, call blocks. And we used to do this when I was recruiting. And like right before the call block, we would like pump up the music and we had like a shared playlist from the team and we'd bump some music. We'd all kind of get together and kind of get like hyped up. And then we'd all like, smile and dial. And, when you're doing it together, it helps, right? When you have a team. But just like even solo working from home, like when I make my sales calls, sometimes I need to put that song on, those different things. But I remember, I grew up and started learning to sell in the Midwest, and I was a big fish in a small pond. And then I went to Italy and got my master's, and then I moved to New York. And when I came to New York, I was like, oh, I'm going to do the same thing I kind of did in Iowa, and I got my ass kicked for about 6 months. And it wasn't until I like, what, I need to put my ego aside, like go back to the basics, like pull out the script, just really kind of like, okay, if then this, and kind of get back to giving myself like a little bit of a framework that I was able to be successful really quickly. And that's somebody who's been in sales for years and done a $5 million book of business from the age 22 to 26. And so I think it's so important always to kind of go back to basics when it comes to selling. And that's why, I think it's great to use a script and it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just giving you a guide. And that's just so simple, yet so hard for so many of us, because I think from a founder mentality, you want to be all knowing about your company. So the idea of maybe using a script kind of feels like you're not all knowing. And the best founders, the best leaders, no, they're not the best at everything. And that's why you go and build these assets for them, which I love. Um, so when you think about, the way, obviously the pandemic's changed everything in the way we do business with Zoom, meetings, selling remotely. When you started in New York, you're cold calling and kind of beating the streets, and now it's a little bit different. You're sitting in Greece for the next few months, getting a nice tan, being with family, traveling a little bit. How has selling changed? And in this kind of digital hybrid world, what does that do or open up for founders and their ability to sell and scale? How have you seen some of these trends or things like that have just like opened up opportunity with your clients?
I think my response is going to be sort of like an anomaly to what you may read online because a lot of people talk about how has selling changed during the pandemic. And obviously, it depends on the industry and the product you're selling. But in terms of like making it harder or making it easier, I don't really see a difference. Like I remember at the beginning of COVID, I was still at Seated and my life changed because my role at Seated was traveling and opening new markets for us. I had been there since raising seed. We had just raised Series B. We were scaling, we were growing, and my job was literally traveling around, going to fancy restaurants and just selling people on our product. And I loved it. And that when we didn't have the opportunity to do it, we reverted back to cold calling. But I was still able to sell. I was still able to reach people. Obviously, our positioning changed a bit, and we had to slightly pivot and come up with additional products to cater to what had changed. But our core value add was the same. Right now, for consulting, the majority of my clients are in San Francisco, and I'm in Greece, and I'm still able to coach them and communicate with them. So if anything, you can reach more people. I don't think, there's a lot of views on, it's more difficult via Zoom. That has not been my experience at all.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think part of that is that there's a lot of conversation happening in the sales world around, and there's this old like relationship selling, and there's still spaces and places where like relationship in the sale is really important. And that's what you kind of lose, people felt like you lose over Zoom. Although some of my best friends and the people on my board of advisors are people I've never met in real life, met through Zoom, met online, and you build these relationships. So I think it's really very possible to build organic and deep, intimate relationships with others online. But not every sale needs you to be their friend for them to buy the product from you, right? I think that if you kind of take it back to like what sales is, and it's like solving somebody's problem, and do you have the right solution that they're willing to pay for, and that kind of takes it back to this idea of if you go back to like leveraging scripts and learning how to share your value prop, share your USPs, like you can do your job from anywhere. You don't need to be building a relationship and taking them out to dinners, although it's nice. I do miss going out and taking people out to golf and dinners, some of those things. But I just think that's, it's a really key point.
I want to touch upon something you just said because I think you're absolutely right. And I've spoken about this a lot on LinkedIn. There's this misconception that people do business with people they like. And although I think it's a bonus to like the person you're buying from, that's not why people buy. We buy because we trust the person to be competent. We buy because we trust their company to be an authority in the space. And ultimately, we buy because we believe that decision to buy solves a problem for us. It helps to like the person we interact with, but I don't really care to actually like you to do business with you. I just want to make sure that if I'm going to pay for something, it will solve whatever problem it is that I have. In fact, I may like you and like to interact with you, but if I don't believe in your ability to solve whatever my problem is, doesn't matter how much I like you, I'm never going to pay for your solution. So the relationship building is nice. And to your point, taking people out to dinner is fun, but it's definitely not necessary.
Yeah. And sometimes, honestly, it creates kind of false positives. If like you build a bit of a relationship and you think that they're going to buy because of that, but if you don't have the right solution, they don't buy, right? And it creates an awkward kind of like, well, what is friendship and what is business relationship, right? I think there's like a balance and a fine line that, you have to kind of understand in the sales process. And that's really hard for salespeople, but even harder for non-business oriented people who are developing companies and learning how to sell and trying to figure out how to navigate these waters of the sales. And I think going back to basics and keeping it simple and thinking about the problem and solution and can we execute is a way to always go back to winning. So I know we're getting close to time, but I have a couple more questions. And one of them I really wanted, you've been You founded a company, you exited, you've been a part of a couple other companies that have exited. As you've kind of gone through your journey, both on the kind of founder entrepreneurial side into working for companies that have scaled and exited, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned about scaling a business that sets it up for a potential exit? What are some of those key takeaways? So, when a company comes to you and is like, we need your help in selling, our goal is to scale and eventually exit. Like, does that change the way you coach them? I know that's a multi-layer question. The first is like, what are some of the key lessons you've learned and how you take that? And then does that change the way that you work with clients if they want to exit versus scale?
Yeah. So to start with the second part of the question, the companies I work with are very early on in their process. So if they at some point want to scale, that's great. But I work with them so early on when they're at seed, and my big focus is there product market fit here? Are we doing our best jobs to find the right messaging for you to go test out the market? Can I help you turn someone from a lead to a paying customer? And what does that pricing look like? And can I give you a process that's repeatable to get you, obviously, depending on your contract value, from 0 to 100,000, from 0 to 1 million in ARR? That's my focus, right? But what I'll tell you from what I've learned doing this work for so long, it really comes down to three main things. It's about people, product, and process. You need to have the right product to solve a big existing problem in the here and now, something that's going to solve a big need. You need to have the right people to help you build a company, especially in startups. Like, I've never worked in corporate, but sort of the stereotype is that you can kind of coast and get the job done. That's not the case in startups. And I always tell people, if you're willing to join a startup, there's massive upside, but there's also massive risk. And you need to be an active player and work day and night to help the company move forward. And if that's not what you're willing to do, that's fine, but save yourself the time and don't be there. Mm-hmm. And lastly, you need to have strong processes in place from day one. I mean, companies fail because they burn through cash, and companies fail because they have no product market fit. So your job is to create processes to help you convert users fast, to help you get cash flow, and to help you identify, is this a product that the market wants? So I really think that it boils down to having A, players, having a strong product, and having a process to help the other two to be able to scale.
Mm-hmm. I love that, people, product, and process. And I think, one of the things that highlights too, in that I love that you work with these companies for product market fit. A lot of times founders, they see a problem, they create a solution for it, and they think that it's just going to have its own product market fit because the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM are all there, and you have like this big market, and all we need to do is go capture 2%. But that doesn't ever fucking work without process, right? You need to have a good process so you can go find the product market fit. And once you find product market fit, you can bring in the people to scale, so on and so forth. And I think we forget that sometimes. And it's really easy to be like, oh, the market's big. We have a solution. It's better than anything on the market. If you don't have a process, you're not going to find product market fit because you need to get in there and listen to your customers, right? Which is part of, what you talk about all the time is listen to your customers. It's why you need to get on the phone and need to have those conversations. So I love that. People, product, process. It's so good. I know we could probably talk for hours, but we don't have that kind of time today. But I do want to, I always like to kind of end with a few kind of key things. One being, what's a book, a resource, a podcast that people out there should be checking out that you would recommend?
People always ask me, what sales book should I read? And my response is always the same. If you want to get good at selling, do not read sales books, read psychology books, because sales is emotional and it's based on the way we think and how we feel when we interact with others. And there's a ton of books that I love, but my number one would be Influence by Robert Cialdini. And just for context, Cialdini was a professor of psychology for years at Stanford, and he did this study where he went to different sales floors, car dealerships, just a bunch of different industries, and studied the different patterns of how we sell and how we buy. So even if you don't apply the principles in the books, it's just fascinating to read and understand what are the principles are at play when we make buying decisions.
Love that. That's a great recommendation. So for all those out there, Influenced by Robert Cialdini. Great recommendation. And I always love asking this question and hearing what people say, but what's your business superpower? What is it?
My business superpower is how curious I am. I question everything. After I understand something, I actually do follow process, and I like to think I'm coachable, but I am so curious about how everything works, why we're doing things a certain way. And if it's working, great. But if something's broken, I'm the first person to go fix it. And because I work with a lot of technical founders, when I start working with them and I'm learning about new products, I'm so curious to learn as much as I can about the industry, their competitors, why they built this thing that they built, why is there a need? And it really helps me be competent at my job, because having that natural curiosity to really learn the most I can about whatever it is I'm working on.
I love it. Curiosity is one of my favorite. It's one of the things that I think makes me unique as well. So I love it. Thank you so much for being a part of Bear Nation. Where can my listeners find you if they want to get in touch with you, learn more, follow your content?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I post almost every day, and it's LinkedIn/Carol Malakasis.
Awesome. I will make sure to have that linked into the show notes for y'all out there. Connect with her. She's got great content. That Startup Girl hashtag That Startup Girl to follow all her content. Carol, thank you so much for being a part of Bear Nation today, all the way from Greece. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Thank you so much.
This was so fun. Thanks again for having me.
You bet. Bear Nation, thanks again. Make sure that you subscribe, please, on Apple or Spotify. Leave me a 5-star review, write a review, the words, all that jazz. It helps so others can find the podcast. Thank you so much. Until next episode, stay well and rise up. Bear Nation, once again, thank you for tuning in and listening to the Bear Necessities podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review. It really does help and means a lot to us at the show. And I want to thank our friends over at Fin. Fin is a social good platform that creates employee engagement and builds culture. It's our mission to support and give back to the communities that we serve around the world. And we do this by giving every guest on our show a $10 donation to the cause of their choosing using the Fin platform. Until next time, thank y'all, stay well, and rise up.